First off, thank you for agreeing to meet with me. I know you said you're moving for a new position, right?
Yes.
First of all, congratulations again.
Thank you.
I know you have a bachelor's, you have a master's, PhD, postdoc. That's a lot, right?
Yeah.
But I guess let's start from the beginning. Let's go back to your bachelor's.
Of course.
Before starting your bachelor's, what was your perception? What was your view? Did you know this was the journey you were going into?
Well, you're right. It is really long. And, if you take me back to bachelor's or even before bachelor's, I didn't know it was going to take such a long time. But before going to bachelor's, I knew that I really wanted to do a PhD. And that's all I knew. And the reason why I wanted to do a PhD is because I wanted to teach. And that has been a long-term goal for me ever since when I was a little kid, kind of following my parents' footsteps, in other words. But I knew I wanted to do a PhD, but I didn't know what I wanted to do it in. And that was kind of where it all started. I went to college, and then kind of by accident, then I stumbled onto research, and then I really like research. But again, it was still under the conception of under the idea of I didn't really know what I wanted to do in research. I just kind of knew that I wanted to do a PhD, and that's about it.
Okay. You said you wanted to do a PhD, you were sure about that, but then you went on to do a postdoc.
Yeah.
Can you walk me through the journey between your PhD and your postdoc?
Yeah.
Were you still interested in teaching?
Yeah. This goal of wanting to teach really drastically changed throughout my PhD career. So I started my PhD, unfortunately, in the middle of pandemic. Everything was online. I didn't even meet my classmates until a year into the program. And, I was still adamant about teaching until I taught, or in the sense of when I started TAing.
Okay.
And my first TA-ship was led by this wonderful instructor who was teaching a survey course in Carnegie Mellon. And it was a huge class. And it was my first time dealing with this many students. Yeah. And that's when I thought, maybe this was not the right path for me. But it was through that experience that I realized that I lean more towards mentorship more than teaching. What I really like was more of a small seminar setting where I could help individual students. So when I was TAing for research methods, these type of really small seminar courses, for instance, that's when I really realized, my passion lies in mentorship instead of teaching such a big class. So I think it's safe to say that I taught to know that I don't want to teach anymore. And then so that has just kind of put me on a trajectory of okay, what's next? Right. Okay. And so it was through that point I realized that, okay, I need to find something else to do. And it was really the idea of where can I use my skills, right? Other than going to professorship, is there anything else beyond the academy that I could really enjoy or excel in or find things that I really want to pursue? So this postdoc was actually a little bit by accident too. So things have changed throughout my PhD career. My advisor moved to institutions and moved here. Mm-hmm. And then I decided to follow her to come here to finish my 5th year of graduate school, which is technically my postdoc year. That makes sense. Okay. So I was in a little bit of a different situation compared to other folks. But so I basically finished my postdoc year. And then that's when I, realized that even in my 3rd year of PhD, I was I'm looking for industry positions. And so that has been a goal ever since I abandoned that teaching goal.
Okay, so it's interesting. I guess I'm interested in the moving here with your advisor. I guess because I had a similar situation where I could have moved, but I didn't move. Mm-hmm. And that's a story for another day.
Right.
But so you moved here. So did you have to graduate? Did she have to graduate you immediately from Carnegie Mellon?
Yeah.
And then you moved here with her?
Yes, exactly. So essentially my PhD program was supposed to be 5 years. So I was fortunate enough and that I had enough data, enough experiments to graduate in 4 years. I basically finished my degree in CMU and then moved here to Texas, Austin as a postdoc.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to go into when you said the whole class, you realized you were more interested in mentorship, right? Going into your career now, was that a determining factor for looking into industry? Did you put mentorship in play into what kind of industry you're going into?
I would say partly so, but I would say the big turning point when I decided that I wanted to explore the opportunities beyond academia was when I started networking with a lot of folks outside of the academy. I also had wonderful mentors in my program who've done internship in industry. And I personally also did an internship at the EdTech field working at ETS, that I started to realize that, I can actually put my skills in play that is not solely dependent on like professorship or like, other postdoc positions or even teaching faculty positions. I think I got a little taste of what it's like working outside of academia, and that really kind of paved the road for me to see, do I see Austin in corporate? Do I see Austin in, a different role other than professorship? So that's when I started to explore. And it was really through networking with folks in the world outside of academia that really gave me an idea of what I could be or what I could potentially develop into.
During your PhD, at what point was it like your first year, second year, third year that you said discovering this? Because I've realized that, like you said, we don't know a lot. We get into for me, for one, right? You get into PhD with a lot of ideas, but like even just engaging in the career institute here, I'm like, I could work in consulting. I could do this. Oh, wow, there's so much I could do. Right. So at what year did you figure this out?
Yeah.
And the second question would be, while we get this information, now I feel like I'm bombarded because it's too much. How do you get to choose? Like, okay, there's so much industry. I could do this, many things in industry. How do you get to choose, okay, I want to go into this kind of industry?
Right. Oh, wow. That's such $1 million question, right? No, I think it's such a great question. And to be honest, I'm also trying to figure it out along the way too. I would say for me personally, my defining point was in the beginning of my third year of my PhD program. I think that was the midpoint of my career or my grad school, where I was like, okay, I've done enough courses. I also done enough research that I could start thinking about my proposal, my dissertation, what it could look like. And then that's where I was at a fork of a lot of different things. And that sort of put me in a place where I really have to like think about, what does the Austin with the degree want, right? And, again, through networking, that's when I started to realize that there's things called data scientists. There's things, and even this data scientist could mean a lot of different things for different companies, right? So, and also the caveat is that what the industry wants at that particular year could also differ, right? Depending on the economy, depending on the demand, depending on, all these different things, that it's not just the data scientist role itself anymore. It could be data scientists looking at operational, internal, external, product analytics, all these different things. So I would say that it was really through, chatting with alumni and chatting with folks who at my internship who are a lot more senior than I was, to get their opinion on like, where should I go? What is good for me? And obviously there's this one aspect of getting input, right? Like passive absorbing all these information, which is overwhelming. But I would also encourage folks, I think for me personally, is to ask yourself, what do I like in this PhD journey? What do I excel at, right? Because PhD, there's so many things, right? From conceptualizing your experiment, proposing your experiment, communication, actually doing an experiment, data cleaning, all these different things. There's so many different pieces, right? And then you feel all these different weight about like the bottleneck of my research program. But I would encourage folks to like really kind of focus on what in that pipeline do you really enjoy, and then kind of develop that. So for instance, for me is I realized that I really like writing and I really want to improve my writing. And one of the things my advisor does extremely well is to write. Oh my goodness. It's, if you could look at her proposal, I would just been like, oh, this is how you tell a story. Right. So right off the bat, I knew that was something that I really want to learn from her. And that was something that I wanted to expand on. So communication was something I really liked in this pipeline. So I intentionally spent more time in developing that area. Or if you're interested in like data analysis, for instance, right? Like modeling portion of things that you could develop that as well. So it was through those pieces to kind of give me an idea of like, what does that future career hold? Like, is it Am I more into scientific communication? Am I more into like modeling, and from there, that gave me an idea of like the work that I might want to do, right?
I like how you touched on this, right? Because before getting into the PhD program, I used to have this idea, which is a story for another day, but I used to have this idea of why I'm getting into the PhD program and what I wanted to do, right? But then when I speak to so many folks that have finished the PhD program and have gone to industry, I see that most of the times they're working on something totally different than even like their whole focus, right? For instance, I could see like some of my peers in pharmacy and they go into like data analysis and they get hired with their pharmacy PhD and everything, but they're doing mostly data analysis. And like you said, it's because there's one part of the pipeline that they're good at, which is like the data part of it,
right,
and they get hired for, right?
Yeah.
So I guess in this sense, why I'm asking this question is because I don't know what role you're going into. You've given a little bit of hint about writing. So I'm guessing it might be something to do with writing or data science. But my thoughts would be, I know from what I read, you have a PhD in psychology.
Yes.
So how much psychology is in this role that you're going into?
No, that's a great question. So yes, I have my PhD in psychology, cognitive neuroscience. So I touch a lot upon human behavior. Most of my dissertation work is looking at behavioral response measures and all that stuff. I'm very fortunate that my upcoming role actually deals with quite a bit of human behavior. So I think it was just kind of naturally collided in that way, which is really, really awesome. And I actually haven't started the role, so I don't actually know how much that was gonna, take a role in that. But I would say that, I think the main point of doing a PhD, obviously, is you're interested in the topic, you're interested in diving deeper into what the ground truth is, right? But I think the most important part of the PhD is also racking up your skills. You're kind of creating a suite of your toolbox, right? So that no matter what field that you go into, after you finish your degree, you'll be able to tackle those really complex problems. Yes, getting a degree in topic X is very important, but also I think the more important part is how do you use the tools that you have, that you racked up during your degree, to solve whatever complex problem that comes in your way, right? I think that for me is more important, and then I wish I knew that a lot earlier.
Yes.
Even even when I was in undergrad too, right? Like I wish I knew that I am learning R, learning stats, learning modeling for solving a future problem that doesn't even evolve in the world of psychology, doesn't evolve in the world of pharmacy, for instance, right? And I think that's what makes a candidate very valuable if you go on the job market. And I think that's just my personal opinion.
Oh, that's like a very great opinion. And I feel like if someone had told me this before I started a PhD, it would have kind of shaped my journey a little better, because I, for one, entered with, I want to find the ground truth about this thing, right? And then you focus so much on it, but it's like, no, there are other skills you need to acquire and you need to like harness, right? And depending on where you want to go in industry, you need to find out how do I start building that skill so well, such that when I get to that stage, I become a valuable candidate. Yeah. I guess my next question would be, how has this whole PhD and postdoc journey, how has it shaped your identity as Austin?
Yeah, that's a loaded question. I love people who ask those questions because everybody's answer is a little bit different. Obviously, we're all individuals. But I think, I think this PhD and this postdoc journey had really shaped me to think critically about complex problems. And I know that sounds super vague, but it's a cliche. It's called cliche, but I would really say that, it was through this 5 year of training that I started to understand what's good storytelling skill. And, it comes handy no matter what field you go into, right? And one of the things that, really excite me is, wow, you can be a wonderful researcher, but if you don't have the ability to communicate your really complex modeling results to any lay audience, right? Then you kind of lose the whole point of your science. Well, I don't know, but you know what I mean? It had really shaped me into a storyteller. And I think it gave me this insight of, wow, I really want to use my skill to make an impact in the world, but also at the same time, mentor other folks who are in the same path, who are kind of struggling to find what's next for them. So I think not only taught me how to be a storyteller, but it also taught me this aspect of resilience, that life is, you don't know what's going to happen, you don't know what's next, but at the same time, you could find passion in the things that you do, right? And we all know that the advanced degree is gruesome, right? It's grinding. You have to grind your teeth, and you gotta be like, put your head down, and it's also a big chunk of your time,
Yes.
right? So I'd say, I found the resilient aspect of me, and this mentality of like, you know what? Let's just try it out. Who knows what's gonna happen? If this experiment fails, it fails. We learn from it and we march on. And I think that's the resilient aspect that I learned from my 5 years here. Yeah.
Okay.
In my degree.
Okay. So let's touching on resilience, right? Can you walk me through your entire journey from PhD to postdoc? What was your lowest moment when you felt like, okay, this is the point, like I'm gonna give up? Like what's happening at this point? And then you had to bounce back up.
Yeah. Yeah. So for audience, that's the lowest point is on a daily basis. No, I think, yes, your question is regarding from PhD to postdoc, but I want to take you back a little bit, even to my like high school, to my undergrad career. So I would say bouncing back is an extremely important skill. And I think that's true for no matter what stage you're in. So a little background about me is that I was never an A+ student. But I was never like a D-. I'm in the middle of the distribution. Sometimes on the lower ends, if I'm lucky, I'm a little bit, in the front of the distribution. But I think my mentality has always been, I'm not an A+ student, I'm not a D- student. Whatever class that I'm in, I'm just going to do the best that I can, get what I want out of that class, and move on. Okay, so that's my mentality, even as a high school student. So my mentality is always just like maintain a B. Okay. Right? Because you're there for a purpose, and that purpose is you just want to find things that you are good at, you're interested in, and that's it. So that mentality has kind of like pushed me in college, where I was just like, wow, there's like so many different hard classes like Gen Chem, Orgo, Bio, all these different classes, and I'm just like, I'm never going to get A's in, but I'm going to try my best, right? Yes. And what I realized throughout this mentality, using this mentality to navigate the world, was that I started to pick up on things that really matters to me, and started to pick up on things that I think I'm good at. And obviously there's things that I am not good at, but I think the most important part was picking up on the things that I don't like. Okay. And that sounds a little kind of harsh, but it's actually really effective, because you don't need to know what you like, but you need to know what you don't like. So it was sort of a rule of elimination for me that I started to realize, okay, maybe, I can do this, I can do that, or things that Gen Chem was something that I was like absolutely horrible at. My mom still laughs at me for getting C-. Sorry, Mom. But so that mentality has kind of instilled me to become who I am. And because of that mentality in PhD and postdoc, I also started to realize that, what part of that pipeline do I really enjoy? Do I really enjoy collecting data? Do I really enjoy finding a story from data? Or do I really like typing out that white paper, typing out that report for lay audience? And what I realized was that, I may not be the best person at conceptualizing, the $1 million experiment idea. What I really like is sitting down and kind of churning out what that data story is, and how do I communicate that story to other folks. So I think this was the kind of the mentality that shaped me, as well as the PhD career that shaped me to who I am today. Sorry, that was a long way around, but
that was so good. Honestly, because this thing you said about elimination, I'm just learning about it this year, because I'm always like trying to be like, I like this, but I also like this, but I also like this, but I like this, right? And it's become so hard. But then I started listening to a lot of people, and I've heard this thing about elimination, where it's like, it's better to just focus on what don't you like and keep removing it.
Right.
And I feel like it's a very, very, very good mentality to have. And I feel like it also helps a lot. I discovered it later. You're lucky to have discovered it early and just been like, right?
Yeah.
Because instead of like going into a world where you're just competing, it's like, why are you even competing? Do you even like this? Or you're just competing because society tells you to compete. Society tells you to be an A student, but why are you an A student? Do you even care about math? Do you even care so much that you want to get an A in like, advanced math? Are you doing anything with advanced math? Or you should worry about like, okay, what do I like?
Yes.
And how do I just excel in what I like and don't care so much about what you don't like. I feel like this is great because even in my FAMD years, I remember my first year was the hardest because I was trying to get an A in all the classes and I was trying to give an effort to, and the truth about it is you can never really give the same effort to all classes at the same time.
Yeah.
So it's like, why not just eliminate what you know you don't really like and focus on what you like?
Yeah.
So this is a really, really good. That was really, really good.
I'm glad. Yeah.
So now that you took us to your lowest point, right?
Yes.
Can you then tell us your highest point? What has been the time you'll be like, oh my God, I love who I am?
Yeah. My goodness. I think, so as I mentioned earlier, I think I really like writing and, I follow my advisor's footstep to UT because I wanted to continue that apprenticeship with her. And I think one thing that I tried to do in my PhD was to challenge myself to like write like her or write as well, kind of like communicate, that level of detail and that storytelling skills like her. So whenever I have a experiment idea or new kind of idea that I want to do, instead of just saying that in the committee meetings or in my advisor meeting, I'll say like, nothing's real until it's written down on paper. And then so for me, I will write my experiment idea as sort of like a specific aims page or like and it's like the roughest thing you'll ever see in your entire life because you gotta start somewhere, right? So, and I sort of took that mentality because again, I'm a B student, right? The worst that you can do is like, your advisor comes back and feedback and like, try again, right? So my mentality really helped me there. It's like it's not going to be an A+ product, but you got to start somewhere. I mean, even just writing it is a lot of work. Yeah. Or rather say that you agree and then okay, let's go. Yeah, so I try to do that early on with her advisor, and then there's this one time that I thought it was the brilliant idea, and I wrote it down and I sent it to her. And then she responded. She's like, wow, I'm impressed. Like, obviously there's a lot of details that we can work through, but she was like, I'm impressed. And I could totally see that logic. And, I think that was the moment where I was just like, oh man, it's all worth it, right? Like I felt like, because one, I found out what I really liked throughout the pipeline. I tried it and regardless of whether it was good or not, my advisor never dismissed my attempt and also gave me compliments and also gave me feedback about how I could improve. So it was, I think that was the point where I realized, man, like I could see the trainee Austin kind of developing into something that he really enjoys and really something that he excels. And I wouldn't say I'm the best writer, but I would say like I would really take a stab at it as a writer and then just kind of, try it. Worst comes to worst, it's a no, right? From your advisor. So I think that was the point where I was like, yes, Okay. I love this mentality of worst comes to worst is it will be a no. So now I want to touch on advisor a little bit. Okay. Because I feel like this can be so different with different advisors. I've had some people tell me like they need to have everything fully fleshed out, perfect, before they even show it to the advisor. Else it's going to be like a repercussion of like, what's this trash you bring it to my... So how did you pick your advisor? How did you say this is the lab I want to get in? Yeah. So I think there's two questions there that I really wanted to pinpoint. The first one is the perfectionist portion of things. I think that's also why, kind of like echoing your experience in your PharmD first year. My first year was also really rough because I transitioned. So I did a post-bachelor research assistant position before going to my PhD. So I also went in kind of with that undergrad mentality that I need to get everything perfect. Everything I say is going to be judged. All my research ideas is going to be judged. And, for a portion of part of it, it's true. But I couldn't get over the perfectionist part of me. But, it was really through this idea of like, okay, I really need to sweet talk the perfectionist in me to be like, you need to like calm down a little bit. Otherwise, isn't going to go anywhere. So I kind of like abandoned that ship. I was just like, you know what? if this is a C plus draft, that's the best that my advisor is going to get. And for me, the most important part was putting things on paper and then sending it out so that you could get the momentum going. And that is true for me. So I think that was how I learned to kind of like shut the perfectionist me up for a little bit, so that's why I can move forward. And to your second question about how do I pick my advisor, I think this was very interesting was because I got into this networking ship really early on. And it was through a post-bac working with a lot of folks at Washington University that I started to do a lot of like informational interviews, even with PhD advisors too. Back then when Skype was a thing, I chatted with my PhD advisor on Skype just to get a sense of like what their communicating style is, who they're looking for. And obviously it was kind of like a meet and greet, right? Because PhD is 5 years of your life, probably even longer. You want to make sure that you are signing the right deal, so to speak. So for me, I emailed a lot of prospective advisors early on. And again, it was the same mentality as worst comes to worst, it's no response. Worst comes to worst is a no. And if they do give you a really, so-called rude or unexpected email, for instance, they're actually doing you a favor, right? Because it also gives you a chance of saying like, oh, is this the type of advisor who I want to work with?
Yeah.
Right. So one thing led to the other. By luck, I was, all the people who I spoke with were super nice and super understanding that where I'm coming from and gave me a taste of what it's like working in their respective universities. And so it wasn't until I visited Carnegie Mellon where I actually interacted with my advisor that I really was like, wow, maybe I see myself working in that lab. I see that it's a very supportive environment there. And so that's how I decided to work with her. Yeah.
And from what you've said so far, it seemed like you really loved.
Yeah, and I enjoy it.
For you to move.
Yeah.
That's a hard one, honestly.
Yeah.
I really loved my first advisor, but it was so tough for me to decide.
Right.
It was so tough just moving across the country. Across the states. I was like,
yeah, right.
So for you to do it,
And
that's
it's a lot of stress, right? Financial, emotional.
Yes.
And even I could do I finish my CMU degree and come here, or do I come here and then do the UT degree, right? There's all these different things that you have to balance.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the journey and just in general, your advice to people. What do you think people misunderstand most about this whole research, advanced degree, PhD?
Yeah, okay. That's also a very good question too, right?
And it could be from an angle of, for someone trying to get into a PhD, what do you think they misunderstand?
Yeah.
And from someone who just sees someone with a PhD, okay, you're a doctor, okay? What do you think they misunderstand?
Yeah. So I want to preface by saying that this is my personal opinion. This might not apply to everyone, but I think one thing that people misunderstand is that they think that PhD needs to be this one grandeur, Nobel Prize worthy, experiment or this dissertation that needs to come out. And granted by the fact that yes, people do that and people enjoy doing that, but I took a little more of a conservative approach. For me, PhD I see it as a 5-year of my life. And it's a 5-year of my life to really, again, rack up the skills that I need to prepare myself for the next stage. That's all I see it as. And with that mindset, that really helped me understand. It became very intentional about the courses that I take, the network, the connections that I make, the conferences that I go to, the professional development workshops that I go to. And once I see it as like something that's just like 5 years of my life, it's a degree, it's an important degree, but it's a stepping stone from the next chapter of my life, then it made me feel like there's a purpose of doing this PhD degree. So I would say, you don't need to create the most innovative, like you're not trying to create an Academy Award winning experiment, right? But it's 5 years of your life, and I would say make it worth it. Find out what you really like throughout that 5 years, and because that is what's going to go with you forever, right? That never stops after you get the degree. So that's my advice for folks who don't really know or are thinking about going to PhD or kind of are in the PhD program that are struggling. I would say like find something that you like within that system, within that pipeline, and then try to expand that breadth other than just like focusing on your own little niche, because you would be amazed at how important it is when you finish your degree and you talk to someone who are completely outside your realm of research, and then you could also maintain a conversation, right? Like, I don't know anything about PharmD program, but I could talk to you about acetaminophen and how that the receptors on like, the liver, or like ibuprofen, how it actually targets the stomach lining. Oh, listen, I don't have a PharmD degree, but like, those are the things.
So that's the breadth. Yes.
That's the breadth, right? You want to expose yourself to a breadth network. Expose yourself, right? Just also learning how to communicate with someone who might not care about what you do, but there could be a really lifelong connection. So that's what I would suggest.
Okay. I'm so glad I'm talking to you because you're giving a very different perspective, and it's so great. And one of the reasons I started this podcast is because of things like this, because you seem like someone that enjoyed your PhD journey. Yes, I know there might be the same rigor that you face that everyone faces, but you seem like someone that you were intentional from the beginning, and you were intentional throughout your PhD journey. The thing is, I've spoken to most people and I feel like they come in with this grandiose idea of a PhD, and then they get to their fourth year and they're burnt out, they're frustrated. Then they become so frustrated. So it's just been like a journey of pain for them, from the start till the end. I've also spoken to people that were also not very intentional about picking the advisor. And those people have been like hating waking up every morning, hating going to, research and all that. So this is a very good perspective because it's like you said, this is 5 years of your life. This is where you will go into. And this is something I feel like people don't consider, right? They think, okay, I'm just going to go do this research. This lab does so much, so great. They have all the equipment, they have all the experiments, but then they forget the people in the lab. And they forget that you have to sit with these people. You have to sit with this advisor all the time. The experiment is just one aspect of the pipeline. And this interaction. So this is why I'm doing this, and I'm so grateful. I'm glad. Yes. So now, like I said, it's been hippie with you. It seems like you've enjoyed your job. So now let me go into the question of what has this journey really cost you emotionally, mentally, physically, financially?
So that's a great question. I also want to start by saying that although it sounds like I really enjoyed my PhD career, for the most part, it's true, but it was never rainbows and butterflies, unicorns. It was also a lot of tears, a lot of sleepless nights on, do I really want to do this? Can I continue? There's so many different low points in my life. I think the reason why I could say all the things that I said right now was because now I'm done with it. I'm outside of the tunnel already. Just want to say that, there was a lot of hard nights as well. But this PhD has really, emotionally wise, I think I matured a lot. And it was, when you're doing science, right? You got to defend your work, right? And that's why it's called a defense, right? And this defense process is everywhere. When you go to a conference, when you present your poster, there's so many people you need to present your work, but you also need to defend your science. And one thing that I've learned, there's this personal level and there's this professional level, right? People might judge you based on your work, not because they actually dislike you, even though they sound like they were like tearing you apart, all that stuff. But it's I'm still learning this. It's separate, right? There's this scientist, Austin. There's also a person, Austin, right? So it forces me to be like, okay, don't take it personally. They're just curious about your work. So that's why, I think I emotionally kind of learn a lot from there. And I also learned a lot about management. And it wasn't about just like manage my own time, my own work. It's about managing people who are like your undergrad research assistants or your TA assistants. But sometimes you also have to manage, right? You need to ask your advisor. Like for instance, one thing that I do is that when I ask for feedback, I intentionally say that this is the level of feedback that I want. I just want big picture feedback, or do I want like minor detail, like grammatical edits, that kind of stuff. So a lot of it, emotionally, it was very dreadful in the beginning because you don't know, there's a power dynamic. So you don't know how to like ask about that. So I think I've learned that emotionally to be like mature enough to be managed up and managed down, as well as like, not take things personally. Financially, I think I think I was very fortunate that I was in Carnegie Mellon, where the stipend was a little bit better compared to other schools. I also lived in Pittsburgh, which was not like New York City where, everything is so expensive and all that stuff. So I think financially it was a lot better compared to other places. But, to a different state, kind of like, it's a big consideration. And for me, the turning point was that I knew that I needed to leave Pittsburgh. Or said in another way, I've used up all my connections in Pittsburgh, that I need to come to a different place and establish new network. So I'm thinking about this from a perspective of like, what does the future Austin need? And obviously I could stay at Pittsburgh, right? Like it's my comfort place. All my friends are there. But, thinking long term, I wanted to expand my network. I wanted to have a Texas network. And that's what really drove me to Texas, to Austin specifically. So people make JoJo Austin. But yeah, I've met so many wonderful connections here. So that was the financial wise, it was a big move, but I think the investment was worth it.
You see, I should have spoken to you when my advisor was leaving, because honestly, I didn't think about the bigger picture of connections. Because truthfully, it's the same connections that I've had since my FAMD years that I'm still having. But if I had moved, I probably would have made newer connections and even explored newer, opportunities. Because like, I feel like in my PhD, now I'm doing my PhD, they have so many programs and they're like, oh, come for them. I'm like, I did all that. In there, done that. Yeah. I'm not doing it right. And it just keeps me not doing some stuff. Right now, I'm just mostly leaving the department because now I'm trying to explore outside the department because I feel like I've exhausted. It might not even be that long term, right? You just go there, finish a degree, and then make the content and leave. So, see, I should have thought about that. I should have known you. I should have met with you. I should have met with you before now. So, speaking of finances, right? Can we speak about? Actually, let's talk about what the funniest or weirdest side hustle you've had to pick up throughout your master's, PhD, like just to make more money, or did you even ever have to do that?
I never had to, or actually, let me say it this way. We weren't allowed to. With our contract, we were only allowed to stay at school. But with that contract of our stipend comes with like TA-ships. So we did have to, TA for 3 semesters. And if we needed more funding, we would have to TA for an additional semester. So we weren't, able to do any of the more side hustles, so to speak.
Speaking of earning, did you ever have an earning amount in your head, finishing your PhD or your postdoc, or when looking for positions? Did you ever have, okay, this is the minimum I must earn because I have this degree? Or let me put the question this way. When you were looking for opportunities.
Great question.
Yeah, because some people have a hierarchy of what some people are looking for, like, okay, does this give me what I'm looking for? Does it make me happy?
It's totally fair. That's such a great question. The reason why I hesitated was like, I would start to think about, I think how I approached that question again was, what matters to me. And I think it's like every point in time, I think I always have to like ask myself, it's like that the week before a new semester starts, like, do I drop this major or do I continue this? Do I take up this class? So I think for me, how I think about it is, I try to maintain a very flexible mindset. I obviously didn't like money wasn't it would be great if, obviously it would be great if it was like, the more the merrier. But I think the first thing that came to mind was, what do I see myself growing in this field? Do I see myself growing in this role? And what type of industry do I want to go to? And then from there, it was through really talking with other folks who are actually in the industry with that role that I might want to work with, to really kind of carve out an idea of like, okay, what does the post-PhD Austin want it to be? And does that satisfy his needs? Obviously, money is important, but also location is important, for instance, right? So for me, how I saw it was like, is this new position going to let me grow more connections? This new position, something that kind of integrated what I like about writing, about communication, about science. Is it in a location that I enjoy? Is it also something that I could really just like grow so that the position that follows my next chapter is also going to could take that skills and then kind of grow even more So that's kind of where my thinking is at.
Okay, so now finally, let's talk about this role you're going.
Okay.
So do you mind telling us what's the title of the role?
Yeah.
Because something I noticed about, I don't know if it's because of my pharmacist background or my family background, but I really didn't even know the titles of these roles in industry.
Yeah.
As, am I a senior scientist? Am I a junior scientist? Am I a scientist? Am I a data scientist? What am I looking for?
Right.
So what's the title of the role?
Yeah.
What are you supposed to be doing in the role?
Okay. So my official title of this next role that I'm going to go into it's more of a consultant type of role. Earlier we were talking about the communication portion of it, being able to bring that science knowledge and then, spread it to different levels of audience is something that I really enjoy. It was kind of like a match, so to speak. And so, didn't even think that I was going to be a consultant because in my idea, right, my little ignorant mind is that consultant is like McKinsey, Lloyd, P&G, right? And so I didn't know that there was this type of consulting that is focusing scientific world. So yeah, that's the role that I'm going into.
Consulting. Okay, so speaking of consulting, like I said, I just found out about consulting, right? So did you have to do case interviews?
So not with this particular role, but I definitely did a case interview before for other position. It was through a data scientist role. Very early on, when I first stepped into the job market last year, it was through my connection that I had an interview with this wonderful company. And it was my first time doing a case interview, and I had no idea what case interviews were. And I literally, because I didn't know anything, I just went in with my little PhD brain, and then it just turns out that like nothing was right. Everything that I said or all of my training that I had in my PhD career was valuable, yes, of course, but it wasn't what the case interviews were asking for. And one of the best advice that I've gotten from one of my mentors was that, with these type of case interviews, you're not trying to reinvestigate the problem, you're trying to demystify the problem so that you could communicate what is the most important finding to, let's say, your manager or senior leadership, right? So, I wouldn't say it was a lot of tears, but it was a lot of like, whoa, so this is what a case interview was. And honestly, and I encourage people to like, get that first interview, get that case interview experience in your mind so that you know what to look out for, you know what to practice for. And that hour case interview was so valuable now that I think about it, because it really puts me in that business mindset. And that business mindset is very different from our training, right, in higher education, because the goals are different. So we can't immediately grab onto like, when we look at a graph, right? We're just like, oh my God, let me tear this. Not that tear this apart, let me understand what the ground truth is. But again, you're not reinvestigating the problem. You're just trying to demystify it so that other people could understand.
What is one thing you have gained from this journey that no one can ever take away from you?
One thing. I think I would have to say coming back to the resilience portion of it, I think no one could take that away from me, because you've gone through the lowest point and what got you back on your feet was your own resilience, and it was through your own exploration, navigation, and finding your self-worth, within this very sometimes demoralizing 5 years of your PhD training. Not demoralizing, but it's like hardship, right? Is what I mean. So I think something that no one could ever take away from me is the resilience portion of it. And I think that really became a part of my equation now. Like, yes, the task is really hard, but let's try it. Who cares, right? Like, worst comes to worst, you fail, but you continue, you march on, right? Right? Like applying to fellowships, for instance, nothing ventured, nothing gained. Try it out. Worst comes to worst, it's a no, right? And for me, that portion of resilience has really brought me to opened a lot of doors for me. I wouldn't say open a lot of doors, but it brought me to a lot of places where I would be able to explore a lot of opportunities that I never thought I would explore.
And I would also say open doors, because The thing of resilience is, like you have said, right? Just try it. If it doesn't work, you try the next one. But I feel like people get so focused on, oh, I need to just try this one thing and be perfect and just try this one thing. And then they get beaten down if they try that one thing and it doesn't work. But it's like, if you tried only one thing, try 7 other things.
Right.
So in that way, one door is going to open for right?
Yeah.
Because I also even realized that I was talking to someone in industry and I was like, talking about how, why is it that some people get selected for some roles in consulting, people don't get selected, and then, but it looks like the resumes are wonderful, right? And he's like, sometimes they just don't have space or something. It has nothing to do with you or your resume or anything.
Right.
It's just something in the company at that point that is making them not to take you. But some people don't understand this and they feel like, okay, maybe I'm not good enough, or you know. So that's a good.
Being on the job market, looking for jobs, I would tell you that. I would also tell me this too myself, is that focus on the things that you can control. Obviously, easier said than done, but a lot of the things with job market is that, like what you said, you don't know what other people are looking for. You don't know what their internal rubric is like. Just because you have a perfect resume and just because you have the perfect answer in your interview doesn't mean that, you know, it will work out. And that's fine, because that's not in your control. You already did your best. You already put yourself out there. I think that's the most important thing. And the thing is just like, you know, onward, right? Like you march on, you try it, and you really go through that interview process to know that you are qualified. That's why they invited you for interview. And I think that's like, focus on the things that you're in control, and everything that's not in your control, kind of just like put it aside. Again, you know, this is easier said than done. I'm telling myself this every day sometimes too.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for taking time. So we like to end the podcast with rapid fire questions. So it's like rapid question, rapid answer.
Oh, okay.
Don't think too much about it. So you get to pick 3 questions. From 1 to 10, you just pick 3 numbers, and I'll give you the questions based on the numbers you picked.
Okay, I'm going to pick 3, 6, 7.
3, 6, 7. Okay. So for number 3, if someone gave you a full refund on your degree or $1 million right now, would you take it?
Oh crap, that's a tough one. Probably not.
Okay. 6. What is the weirdest advice you actually found useful during your academic journey?
I wouldn't say it's a weird advice, but it was actually valuable advice. Was nothing ventured, nothing gained, and that's been sort of my motto ever since, you know, doing my PhD. Okay.
And number 7, you said, right? In one word, was it worth it?
Yes. I didn't know rapid fire questions could be $1 million. Really had me hesitate for a little bit. Yeah, no, thank you so much for inviting me, and I really hope, and I just want to say that, you know, you're doing some very important work, and I wish I knew this kind of resources were out there when I was, you know, pursuing my advanced degree. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.